Addressing Gettysburg.
Welcome once again to our fifth, I think it's our fifth.
I think so too.
Our fifth season of Get Out of the Car tours. To all of you who have been coming, thank you very much for continuing to come. For those of you who are new, thank you for giving it a try. I think you'll enjoy yourself, and I think you'll find that this is a good group of people. Cindy, you could bring Major up here so she stops barking if you want. Bring her on up. Let everybody meet Major. Major is our one-year-old puppy, and she doesn't like being away from me. Here, I got her.
Clearly.
Okay. All right, there she is. Okay, everybody can see you now. No, wait here. Now she wants you. Anyway, we're doing it again this year, and here we are, and Lewis is our guide. Is there anybody, if this kid should tire out from carrying this flag, who would like to do the honor of carrying the flag? Yes, back there, come on up. Yes, Matt, come on. Okay. Come on up. We're going to have a whole color guard if you want to do it. We'll switch it off. Anybody else brave enough to carry the flag? No? Okay. All right, that's good. Thank you guys for your impeccable service. Otherwise, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Lewis Trott.
Thank you. All right, thank you again for having me out here. By this point in life, Matt knows a lot of guides, and he talks to guides more than I do, and I'm a guide. So he could have his pick of the litter to come out here. People a little more smarter than me that can enunciate better and provide a thought with more clarity than I could ever do, because I tend to fumble over my words at times. But he entrusts me with this, as he has from the beginning, and I'm truly honored to be the guide for these tours. It's been a long 5 months, and Oh, thank you. And I'm excited to be back for another season of these. This year, we've got you eventually run out of topics. You get through all the brigades, and I've done the Vermont Brigade today because let's do the Vermont Brigade. I don't have a special reason, other than they do play an important part in the battle, and I think they're frequently overlooked. But we've got a few tours this year starting next month based on individuals, and we'll talk about their actions on the field. So this year might have less walking, but you'll still be out of the car. And then so we'll go through the year and explore different areas of the battlefield. So with that, we will do the Vermont Brigade. I apologize for my throat if my voice starts to go. The pollen has been hard this year. It was a nice day Thursday, and I decided to go out running, and I'm a mouth breather, and I'm running along, and I said, I think if I take this road, it'll take me this place, and it's hot by this point. It's in the afternoon, and I get on a road, and I look up, and I don't know where I'm at. And I feel like Henry Fonda and on Golden Pond, and I'm just running around like, where's Katharine Hepburn at, And but I make it back home, and my throat was wore out. So, and it's been dry ever since. So I'm going to keep hydrated, and hopefully my voice will hang in there. So again, welcome to our tour. We're doing the Vermont Brigade. They are one of two Vermont brigades that are here at Gettysburg. We're talking about the 2nd Vermont Brigade, a 9-month regiment filled with 9-month regiments. The 1st Vermont Brigade is in the 6th Corps. They're on the other side of the Round Tops on Howe Avenue. They march up here with the 6th Corps, a long march, but they get put over there and they really don't see any action. I think they suffer one casualty through their time here at the battle. But they suffer a tremendous amount of casualties through the war. So they're sort of taking a breather here at Gettysburg, and the heavy lifting's being left to their sister brigade over here, the 2nd Vermont. Like I said, they are filled with 9-month regiments. These regiments were called up in late summer of 1862. Things aren't really going so well for the Union Army. They had 2nd Manassas where they get beat again. If they have competent command, I think the Union Army would end this in 1862, but they don't. They have people that are really great at organizing the Army, but they don't want to destroy the thing they've organized, so they don't employ it to the full force. So the war goes on. In the fall of 1862, Lincoln issues a call for another 300,000 troops. And then he issues a second call for another 300,000 9-month troops. And while I was researching to do that, I'm thinking, if you can call up over 500,000 men just like that, this should be a no contest. If you're able to call up this many men midway through the war to prosecute this war where the Confederates can't do this, this should be over quickly. But we know it's not. After Gettysburg, it goes on for just about 2 more years. So these are some of those men that are going to get called up in August of 1862. They're going to muster in Vermont, these various places in Vermont. They're going to get together, and then they're going to start their training. Their first commander was a fellow named Edwin Stoughton. Now, he had been a soldier previously in the war. He is a West Point graduate. He graduated in 1859. And in September 25th of 1861, he was appointed command of the 4th Vermont. So he has war experience. He's fighting on the peninsula with McClellan in 1862 with the 1st Vermont Brigade. Once they call up these 9-month regiments, Stoughton is back in Vermont. He's going to start recruiting for them, and he is going to be put in charge of the 2nd Vermont Brigade. The 2nd Vermont Brigade is then, once they get their equipment and stuff and they've gone through a little bit of training, they're going to be stationed outside D.C. down in Virginia around Alexandria and Fairfax area, and they are guarding the defenses of Washington, D.C. And that's how they're going to spend the majority of their time. So they're not doing a lot of heavy marching. They are soldiering. They're doing drill whenever they can. They're going out on picket duty whenever they can. They're responding to people saying there's an emergency out there, there's cavalry running around, so they're being woke up and man your defenses and all that stuff. But they're not doing any heavy marching. They're guarding the approaches to Washington, D.C. It's while they're down there in March of 1863 that Stoughton makes his headquarters at Fairfax Courthouse. And that's about 2 miles from his brigade. That's a pretty far distance. The men in the ranks are sort of bitter about this because they're out there sleeping in the rain. You know, they're making their tents the best they can, but they're sleeping in the weather. Where Stoughton is sleeping in a nice house, he's eating good food, he's entertaining, and he's safe and sound 2 miles from the rest of his brigade. And then along comes a fellow named John Mosby. He's probably, if I could get a Mosby tag, I would. They definitely won't give me that anymore. I'm barely hanging on to my Robert E. Lee tag as it is. So, but Mosby comes along with his raiders, and if you don't know who Mosby is, he's it's sort of a partisan soldier. He was in the Army of Northern Virginia with Stuart. Stuart recognizes his abilities and detaches him as sort of an independent command roaming around in Loudoun County and Fairfax County, Virginia. So they're going out there with this partisan band of cavalrymen, creating mayhem down there, messing with Union supply lines. And on March 8th, Mosby is looking for another fellow named Colonel Percy Wyndham. He does not like Colonel Percy Wyndham of the Union Cavalry. And he thinks he's in this house in Fairfax Courthouse. So him and his men go up there to raid this house. Percy's not there, but they find Edwin Stoughton there. And they take Edwin Stoughton and a bunch of his aides captive. And the men are, I don't know, they're not sad that their commander's been taken. They wish it didn't happen because it's embarrassing, but they're not disappointed to lose him because of the way he had been acting. He's not the most popular fella. So he is gone. He is taken captive by the Confederate cavalrymen under Mosby, and he rides off out of the picture. To finish up his story, because I'm not going to come back to him, just so we can have some conclusion. At the time, he was the youngest brigadier general in the Union Army when all this happens. But his commission's about to expire. If he would have been having just an average war career and doing at least what he's supposed to be doing, that commission would have been renewed by the Senate. As it was, they let it expire, so he loses his generalship. He was exchanged in May for Confederate prisoners that the Union had, but the Union command structure makes no effort to reappoint him to any further command. So his Civil War is basically over. He goes back to New York. He goes up to New York City. He becomes a lawyer, of all things, and he dies in New York on Christmas Day, 1868. So he doesn't live too much longer after the war ends. But that March 8th, 1863 effectively ends his military service when Mosby captures him. So now the 2nd Vermonters need a new commander. Going back to Staunton a little bit, this is from the Vermont Watchman State Journal, 20th March, 1863. General Staunton captured. A smart affair of the rebels at Fairfax Courthouse this morning is reported here. And this is dated, the report's dated March 9th. The story is that 2 rebel companies of cavalry slipped in quietly this morning at 2 o'clock and carried off General Staunton, his guard, and the brigade band as prisoners. The 3 Vermont regiments knowing nothing of it until the rebels had been gone for 2 hours. It seems that General Staunton had his headquarters at Fairfax Courthouse and at a distance of about 2.5 miles from the nearest regiment of his brigade, having no force with him except his staff, the brigade band, and a guard. And he has the band. Why do you think he has the band there? Part of the entertainment, because that's what he's doing. So that's reported back home. It's very much embarrassing to Staunton and the Vermont Brigade, quite frankly. There's a report for the same newspaper on Wednesday, March 11th, 1863. At the end of that report, it is stated that President Lincoln, when informed that General Staunton had been captured by the rebels at Fairfax, is reported to have said that he did not mind the loss of the brigadier as much as he did the loss of horses. For, said he, I can make a much better brigadier in 5 minutes, but the horses cost $125 apiece. So, with a sentiment like that coming from the top, you know you're not going to get back in the Army. Your days are done. So, in comes this fellow named George Stannard. You look up there he is. He's born in 1820, October 20th, in Georgia, Vermont. Not Georgia down south. A place called Georgia, Vermont. Before the war starts, he is in a militia. That militia eventually becomes the 4th Vermont Regiment. They appoint him in charge. But then, when they start recruiting for the 1st Vermont, they pull him out. He was colonel there. He's going to get reduced to lieutenant colonel of the 2nd Vermont. And that's how he's going to start his war. He's lieutenant colonel of the 2nd Vermont Regiment. March 11th, 1863, he was advanced to brigadier general, and they put him in charge of the 2nd Vermont Brigade. That's how he becomes in charge and is here at Gettysburg. It's because Staunton gets captured. It's a what if, but I don't think Staunton would have done nearly as well a job as Stannard does here at Gettysburg if he had remained in charge. So we'll never know. It's just something to think about. I'm going to finish up his story real quick because I'll forget at the end to come back, and I would be remiss if I didn't do that. He's going to go through the war from that point on, and once the 2nd Vermont musters out of the Army in July and August of 1863, he stays in the Army, and he goes on to, they're going to raise another regiment up there, the 17th Vermont, so more regiments are being raised from Vermont to join the war effort. He's going to be staying in the Army with them, and eventually, if you look up there, he's going to lose his arm. He has both arms here at Gettysburg, but the monument portrays him without his right arm that is amputated later on. It's outside Richmond. I think it's Fort Harrison outside Richmond where he gets wounded, causes the loss of his arm. They put that on top of the monument, not necessarily for accuracy that he had both arms here at Gettysburg, but it's to symbolize the loss that these men suffered and the sacrifice these men made, not only here at Gettysburg, but throughout the war. So that's the symbolism of what he looks like up there on the monument. But here, he had both arms. After the war, he is going to be working with the Freedmen's Bureau. If you know anything about Oliver Howard, he's in charge of the Freedmen's Bureau after the war. Howard University down D.C. is named after him. Stannard's going to be working for that agency also to help free black slaves get off their, get up and get going again. Later, he's going to be appointed collector of customs for the District of Vermont, and this is one of those plum jobs back then that you get. And he held this post until 1872. From 1881 until his death, he is in Washington as the doorkeeper of the House of Representatives. So he goes down in D.C. and he's the guy in charge of the door, I guess, until he dies. And he dies on June 1st, 1886. He's buried up in Lakeview Cemetery in Vermont. So that's the story of Stannard.
With a similar statue.
Huh?
With a similar statue. Right?
Oh, okay, yeah. And I'll talk about it. Oh, I neglected to mention. I'm glad you said that, because I'd have been driving home today and got angry with myself. I said, man, I meant to say this, and there's no way I can get this word out to these people. So they capture Staunton on March 8th. March 17th, Mosby's riding around about 5 miles from where I presently live. And there's a trail that runs by this place called the W.O.&D Trail. It's Washington and Ohio Dominion Railroad, but now it's a running biking trail, and I like to run out there. I don't get lost on that trail. It's point A and point B and back. There's no side, you know. March 17th, 1863, in Herndon, Virginia, there's a railway depot, and there's a nice house there. Mosby's men ride in there, and they raid the place. They capture Major William Wells. Everybody know who he is. Medal of Honor awardee from the Battle of Gettysburg. His statue's down there on the other side, Big Round Top, before you come up Big Round Top. And you reminded me of that because there's the exact same monument at Gettysburg than there is up in Vermont where he's buried, or at least the town, the exact same monument. But he captures Wells in this other raid. The difference is they exchange Wells, he comes back, and he wins the Medal of Honor at Gettysburg. So it's a tale of two men. He was better, you know, respected by his men, and he was doing his job. He just happened to get captured by Mosby, because Mosby's a smart guy. So you've got these regiments in the 2nd Vermont Brigade. You have the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th. When I was studying for the exam, I liked it when they had numbers in a row. It made it much easier to remember. You start 1, 8, 15, and 29, I get lost about the third number. But we got 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16th. Everything starts moving north from Virginia. The Vermonters are down there, wonder what's going to happen. And this is going to come from the 2nd Brigade, or Camp Life. It was written in 1864, so right after the battle, by a fellow named Edwin Palmer. He's with the 13th Vermont. And he was writing in his diary, and he includes in his diary letters home. June 23rd, so everything's moving north at this point. Both armies are coming north. And to me, there's two really fascinating periods that I really like to read about. It's as the armies are moving up here and nothing's really happened. And then in between the first day into the second day, and in between the evening of the second day into the third day's action. The periods where they're not fighting are just as fascinating to me as when they're engaged in actual battle. And that's why I include stuff like this in these tours. When June 23rd, Palmer writes, "We have our usual drill in the afternoon." And they're still down in Virginia around Alexandria area, Fairfax. At the close, arms are stacked. We go to our tents and eat a few hardtacks and drink a little coffee. Read our letters just from home, and the drum beats for dress parade. Regimental orders are read, and General Pleasanton's report of his victory over Stuart last Sunday. Then the colonel steps forward, and Pleasanton exaggerates a lot. Then the colonel steps forward and informs us that he just received orders for his regiment to be ready to march at a moment's notice with 10 days' rations. I hear the soldiers whisper, "This looks a little like fighting. None can imagine the direction of our course. Such is Tuesday evening with many rumors about the invasion of the North. At dark, teams are started for rations and return at daybreak. The troops around the station have the same orders as we. Lee is thought to be in Maryland and intending on an attack on Washington or Baltimore. If we move, this whole line, the station, Centerville, Fairfax Courthouse, and all of south of Alexandria are to be abandoned, and we go north. He writes the following short letter will show what the soldier thought at night. And he's writing to his sister. My dear sister, these changing worlds have not caught us yet. Last night we received orders to be ready to march, but we have seen no signs of it during the day. And we may, but I must change the tone of my letter at once, for an orderly has just come from headquarters to tell us that the whole brigade is to march in the morning. This monotonous drama is ended, and the next will close with the battlefield. May God shield the soldiers and give us victory. Give them victory. Your affectionate brother. So, while the Army's moving up, they're still down in Virginia. They haven't been assigned to anybody, and rumors are rife because that's what happens when soldiers sit around and they know events are going around them. I remember when I was in Desert Storm. When we get there, I got there in August. It was the week Elvis died, actually. Ask me later how I know it was the week Elvis died, the anniversary of it. But we get there, by October, people are coming around saying, oh, they're sending more troops over here. We're going home by Christmas. We didn't go home by Christmas. I went home till April the next year. So that's what happens when troops sit around and there's movement around you. You know it's moving, but you haven't been told everything. You think you're going to move and you're not. Estella, please come forward. There you go. Just hold on to that till you know. So I handed out these cards. It'll be apparent why I gave out the cards here in a little bit. But a few of them had names. I know I gave Richard a name, and I gave some other people, and I know I gave Estella this one because she's got the most reading. So this is from a fellow. She volunteered. This is from a fellow named William Doubleday. He is in the he's company H, 14th Vermont. I get this letter from a book called 9 Months to Gettysburg. It's written by Howard Coffin. So usually I get stuff out of original sources. I couldn't find this anywhere else. I wanted to include this because it highlights the story pretty good. So go ahead and read. Sixteenth. I couldn't either.
Yeah.
You need a drink while you read. There's someone in the back.
Okay. Dear wife, well, Sixteenth, we have got orders to march in the morning. We are to start at 7 and be at Union Mills by 11. We are to go far from there. We are not allowed to know. Some say we are going to Harper's Ferry, some say to Maryland, but we shall not know until we get to our stopping place. I think we shall go where we shall see Rebs, perhaps some fighting, but I don't calculate to get killed now, just before our time is out. I put on an overcoat in a box to send home today. I was in hopes we should not have to move until after I got another letter from you, but I may not get yours as soon as I should hear. Take a break.
You want me to read?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm afraid I shall hear some bad news from home when I get a letter from you, if there is anything in dreams. I dreamed that you and I stood up with a couple to be married last night. I hope I shall hear that Freddie is better and the rest of you are well. The boys are all wide awake for a fight here. I can't say that I really want to be in one, but I don't dread it much. If we don't get into one, I shall try to do my duty. If I should get killed, perhaps it would be as well for you. You would draw a pension of $8 a month, and we have a chance to get a younger and better husband.
Ashley says that all the time about me.
I have a new one I can use. Kiss the boys for me, from Willie down to little Fred. Hoping I shall be spared to meet you all again in a few weeks. I wish you good night for your ever-loving husband.
William Doubleday.
Doubleday.
You're reading this so I don't cry. So you can't cry. What are you doing to me? Thank you, Estella. All right, let me get a swig here. But you see, he doesn't know where they're going either. Either Harper's Ferry, Maryland, they're just unsure, and he's riding home to his wife. These are from, I got this from the Vermont Historical Society on their website. This is from the camp of the 12th Vermont. Letter from Roswell Farnham to his wife Mary. Dear Mary, we have reached this place, Frederick. He writes Frederick City, Maryland. We have reached this place this morning. It's June 29th, 1863. After a hard march through the mud and rain. We have been here an hour and it's now 1 o'clock. He goes on, I'm not going to read you the whole thing because it's kind of long. Hooker is removed from the command and General Meade of the 5th Corps is at present in temporary command. So we are told. Doubtful. So they've been switching commanders so much, even though the Vermont Brigade hadn't had to deal with that a lot. They know these commands have been switched out a lot. So now we've got a new one. Meade is in charge. It has rained today and is very muddy. 20,000 men have passed over these roads within a few hours, and they are tread into mortar. Now this I find interesting. We have a long march tomorrow as we are expected to reach Gettysburg. This is on the 29th. So word has trickled down that this is now where they're going. Before that, I've always assumed that Meade would tell Reynolds is charge of the left wing, hey, go up here towards Gettysburg or something. But it's not until they actually get up here that they decide, well, and the roads bring them in, we're going to fight here. This soldier's writing back home to his wife on the 29th. He thinks they're going to Gettysburg. So somebody's either told him this or he's just a brilliant military strategist. I'm not sure. I understand we are to leave. I understand we are to have an invitation to remain in the Army when this enlistment, because they're at the end. But it is extremely doubtful about the boys remaining. At any rate, you need not give yourself any uneasiness in the matter. Let's see. This is at once, couple days later, he writes, it would be strange if we were asked to stay a little longer, and it would be not strange if we stayed. Our boys feel better. So they are marching up here knowing that their time is expiring and it's almost time to go home. And that's what soldiers want to do. They want to go home. Generals want to win battles and become famous. Soldiers want to go home. And that's today. It happens today. That's not to say we don't go out and give our very best and do our duty for our country and our fellow soldier beside us. But when the day's over and you're sitting there thinking about life, I want to go home. And that's what these guys are thinking. So they are going to be assigned to Doubleday's 3rd Division of the 1st Corps. The 1st Corps is already moving up here. They're trying to catch up to them. So they've got hard marching to do. And as they're coming up here, they're going to march approximately 150 miles in 7 days. And what have they not been doing down at Fairfax Courthouse? They have not been marching. They're doing drill, but that's a lot different than getting out on these dusty roads, these muddy roads. You don't have water. It's hot. You're not used to that. So they're wearing themselves out. And when they get up here, a lot of their shoes are wore out. And they heard from somebody on the Confederate side that there's a shoe factory at Gettysburg. So they're looking for it. That's a lie. I made that up. But they don't have shoes. The quartermasters don't want to issue them new shoes, though. Why do you think? They're about to get out. When I came back, I think I was about a month out from coming back in Iraq in 2009, and I got brand new boots that still haven't been worn to this day. So how things changed. I don't know why they gave me the boots, but I said, yeah, I'll take them. Who knows? You know, I was still in the military. I'll wear these out, then I won't have to pay for other boots. So, but they wouldn't give them any shoes because they are mustering out of the Army. But as they're coming up here, one of the more famous stories happens, not only to the Vermont Brigade, but it's known to aficionados of Gettysburg. And that happens to a fellow named First Lieutenant Stephen Brown. He is with the 13th Vermont Volunteers. And he's a lieutenant, he's in Company K. And this comes from the pictorial history of the 13th Regiment Vermont Volunteers, written by one of their soldiers. He was their historian, Ralph Sturdivant, and published in 1910. First Lieutenant Stephen Brown of Company K, prompted only by motives of humanity after repeated requests for permission for some of the boys of his company to leave the ranks for water, and discovering the fainting condition of some, took Private Oliver Paraso of Company K, loading themselves with all the empty canteens they could carry, and started for a nearby spring for water, which they found in charge of a mounted safeguard, who informed Lieutenant Brown that his orders would not allow him to procure water at the spring. General Stannard has said there be no falling out of the ranks for any reason. That includes going to get water. So Stannard does a lot of good things in command. This is not one of them, in my opinion. If your troops fall out of ranks and they die of heat exhaustion, they don't do you any good here. So I know they're in a rush to catch the Army, but they got to have water, and they don't have these water buffaloes like we have following around with fresh water that you fill up your canteens from. Lieutenant Brown said, "My men are fainting from thirst and must have water. Water I have come for, knowing what the order was, and with or without your consent, water I must and will have." He gave his name, rank, and company, and regiment to the safeguard, who immediately rode off in haste, and Lieutenant Brown and Private Parizo filled their canteens with water and returned to the company and quenched the thirst of many of the thankful privates. And for this act, Lieutenant Brown was placed under arrest and relieved of his sword. As they're moving up here, Lieutenant Brown procures a common camp hatchet that belonged to a comrade and went into battle with this hatchet as a substitute for his sword, and no one was foolish enough to object to Lieutenant Brown taking part in the fight, though only armed with that ancient and barbarous and savage weapon of warfare. I'll talk about what he does with the hatchet and stuff when we get out here. If I don't, remind me. So they move up here. This is from Edwin Palmer, again of the 13th Vermont. They're not here yet, though. It's July 1st, they're not here. Wednesday, early we are informed that we shall not march today. So many lie down, and they're down at Emmitsburg. Many lie down and sleep, and many seize the time to ride home. But unexpectedly, about 9 o'clock, orders come for us to fall in. We move rapidly through the mud and rain when suddenly at 4, the smoke, like a vast, dark, snow-drifting cloud, rolls up before us from the field of Gettysburg, 5 or 6 miles away. So they're moving up from Emmitsburg. There's a wagon train down there. When they move up from Emmitsburg, only 3 of the 5 regiments are going to move up here. The 13th, 14th, and the 16th. The 12th and 15th are told to stay at Emmitsburg and guard the wagon train. General Sickles, y'all heard of him. Ask Jim Hessler if you want to know anything about him. He comes along and he says, and I'm paraphrasing, "We don't need all of y'all down here guarding. One of these regiments can leave and come up." So how they decide, I'm not sure. They draw straws and say it's your turn to go. The 15th Vermont is going to leave Emmitsburg, and they're going to march up to Gettysburg. And this is one of the saddest stories of this. If you're a soldier in the 15th Vermont, they get here, they move up here to this side of Cemetery Hill, and they're told, "We don't need you. We need you to go back to Emmitsburg." So they turn around and they go back to Emmitsburg. So they were at the Battle of Gettysburg. They didn't do a thing other than come up, "Hey, look at the monuments. This is great." And they went back to Emmitsburg. So they're not here. So from this point on, we're talking primarily about 3 regiments, 13th, 14th, and 16th. Everybody got a little card? Yep. You shouldn't have one with any other number other than 13th, 14th, and 16th. If you do, I was about to fall out of my chair when I was writing those things. As they're coming up, as we are approaching the field, we meet women and children going back into the country, now and then looking around with terror on every face. But one middle-aged woman stands nearly still, bareheaded, while the brigade is passing her, screaming till she can hardly speak. "Go ahead, boys, the rebels are off over there," and swinging her large naked arms in all directions, causing gentle and hearty laughter among all the soldiers that see her. So this is the civilians going this way while the Union Army's coming up here. This comes from Brigadier General George Stannard's. It's excerpts from his diary that can be found in the Batchelder papers in the first volume. The 3-volume work if you're not familiar with it. He's going to write in his diary on June 29th, left camp at 7 o'clock. It rained very hard in some parts of the day. All the roads were very muddy and consequently many of the men fell out. The great portion after we left Frederick. I think whiskey the cause. They marched until this time first rate. They count their time by days. Consequently, they do not have any heart in the work. Officers as little as men. That's his impression, but that's not reality. He's not in the ranks and he doesn't know because they haven't been tested. He's basing these comments on how they're performing marching up here, and he's asking a lot of them because they're not used to marching. Adamsville, June 30th, left Adamsville, started from the other side of Adamsville at 6 o'clock a.m. Kept the pike all the way. The men marched well and the road clear. Just before we reached Emmitsburg, the men fell out badly in consequence of exhaustion. We were ordered to guard train for the 1st Corps, which was parked at the former place, Emmitsburg. Was in camp at 7 o'clock, men very much exhausted, but they all came but 2 after a time. 6th day of continual marching. Roads very muddy and rain considerable every day. Marched 17 miles. July the 1st, received orders to join the 1st Corps and was assigned to the 3rd Division as 3rd Brigade with 3 regiments, leaving the other 2 as guard for Corps train at 8:45 o'clock a.m. and marched at 9 or 10 o'clock. Found good road after we turned to Gettysburg, and at 3 o'clock we commenced hearing firing. The men brightened up and marched in the very best order. That's a very different impression than what he'd stated a couple days previous. Kept at all times well closed up and no one falling out. The day's fight was over when we arrived, and our large corps had fought most of the day. Was in position at 7 o'clock. And in position means Cemetery Hill is up here, and they are on the southern slopes of Cemetery Hill, meaning the 12th Corps and then the part of the 1st Corps is extending over towards Culp's Hill, but the 11th Corps is pushed out, and they're standing in that area. I think it's called the annex of Cemetery Hill. They're looking into the town. The Vermonters are going to come up behind them. You have to remember that portion of the hill doesn't have what it has today. It had a few trees, but there's no graves in there. So that is a bald hill for the most part. Evergreen Cemetery is over towards the east, but back then it's nearly not as full as it is today. So it's a lot more open ground than it is today. But they're up there on the southern slopes of Cemetery Hill offering support, and they're told to sit there, stay there that night. Now, in the morning, well, we're going to July 2nd. About 1 o'clock, General Doubleday sent for me and requested my company in front to calculate the manner of defense if attacked. We rode to the hill, and then a captain of artillery requested that we dismount, as it was very unsafe to ride in that locality. We then went over the ground. The artillery opened on that point. It was at this time, or I was at this time ordered to take command and protect the position if assaulted. At all events, to keep a strict watch of all rebel movements. 5 companies were detached from the 13th Regiment and ordered up the hill to support if necessary. The infantry on and about the hill was protected by a stone wall mostly. So now the 13th Vermont's going to get split up. 5 companies are going to be sent to the northern slopes of Cemetery Hill, and so the 13th is left with another. So it's basically 2 battalions. You have 1 battalion gets sent to support the line, and 1 battalion still back here in reserve. In a consequence of the 5 companies being detached from the 13th Regiment, only 5 companies were under Colonel Randall's command. Francis Randall is the commander of the 13th Regiment. When down near where so I'm jumping ahead. While the fighting's going on, Union artillery, and I don't know which battery, they write in here it's a Pennsylvania battery, but they're taking incoming, and the men from this battery start to wander away and go backwards. It's the 13th Vermonters that come up to help support that gun. And primarily we're going to be out here talking, that's where all the group involvement's going to be, but not enough people talk about what the Vermonters do on the second day. So they're up there on Cemetery Hill supporting this Union battery that the men are running away from. And then you got these other 5 companies from the 13th. They're going to go out here. Hancock's going to send them out here on the field that we'll get to. Any questions at this point? I encourage questions. I knew you'd have one. You know the answer to it too. Yeah, you do. All right, go ahead.
Stoughton, Edwin Stoughton, that name is familiar. Was Major Homer Stoughton of the 2nd U.S. Sharpshooters related to him?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Just same name. Yeah, I never saw that, and I think it would have been mentioned. I got the biographical information for the 2 generals from Generals in Blue by Ezra. I can't remember the name. Warner. Very good. Thank you. Great book, but that's where I got it. It made no mention of that. So I think it's just a weird name that 2 people have it.
Wasn't the Pipe Creek Plan still in effect on June 29th? And if so, I'm wondering why the regiment was planning on hiking north of Pipe Creek all the way to Gettysburg.
The Pipe Creek Plan is in effect. To me, Meade is saying, if we can't do anything north of that, this is where we'll make our stand. So I don't think he's 100% sold on the Pipe Creek. He's got a plan if things break down north of that. And that's a good idea versus if things go wrong up in Pennsylvania, I don't know what I'm going to do, you know. So he comes up with this plan. And then, of course, that it becomes a whole different animal because they use it against him. So he's sending Reynolds up here as the left wing commander. And I look at it as a contingency plan because they clearly don't stop there. They're clearly moving north. It's a contingency plan as a good commander would have. And I don't think it's anything more than that. But of course, Sickles and others are going to come back and make it more than that. And you know, so does that answer yours?
Yeah.
Good.
Did Doubleday survive the war?
William? We'll get to that. Why do you think I'm not reading the stuff? You ain't gonna see me cry on camera. I hope. It's terrible. I wonder if any other guides have these problems that I have. I don't know. I never used to be, I'm very grumpy. I mean, I have a good reputation for grumpiness, and it deserts me when I'm out here. Now I gotta keep it in my pocket and just pull it out when these moments come. So, let's see here. While they're up there, again, I'm going back to the pictorial history of the 13th Regiment. Some Pennsylvanians, again, leave their guns. Those 5 companies are up there. And the Sturdivant, the historian, writes, while intensely watching the fighting in this direction, that would be that direction, artillery shells are coming in, endeavoring to ascertain whether we were being driven back, our attention was called to the fact that a nearby battery had for some reason suspended firing. Only 2 or 3 gunners stood by their guns, steadily gazing across the valley, apparently as fixed in position as the cannon beside them. Lieutenant Stephen Brown, him of the hatchet, of Company K, saw the forlorn situation and hastened to them to ascertain the trouble, only a few yards away. After a brief interview, of which we of Company K watched with interest, came running back and reported to Captain Blake and suggested assistance and asked permission to take some of the boys and go up and help them fire the guns of that battery. Some carried shells from the caisson situated just down the hill, part way up, and others to the gunners and assisted them in firing their guns until the chest of that caisson was empty. Lieutenant Brown and his boys returned to our position safe and sound with powder-smoked hand and faces. Some had holes and rents in the clothing they wore. They had a thrilling experience, and which with great admiration and pride, each enthusiastically, as enthusiastic as that dog, related to his immediate comrades on their return. The author, as an eyewitness to this incident, recalls it is one of the most daring, unusual, and valiant incidents that he witnessed during the battle. I have many times wondered what those statue-like gunners thought when they first saw Lieutenant Brown approaching them, uniformed as an infantry officer with a common camp hatchet in his right hand, swinging it in the air as he leaped Indian-like to their side. They must have thought him crazy, or that he belonged to a regiment of wild Indians from the plains west of Mississippi. So he takes his hatchet, and he's still leading the way. While they're up here, this comes from the same publication, most of us recall that we were marched considerably after reaching Cemetery Ridge, and we seemed to be without any particular purpose. That's after they get here that first day. And it was said that General Stannard swore like a piper, and Colonel Randall filled the air with his accustomed and peculiar dialect, because so much moving about when their boys were all tired from our long day's march and wanted to rest. Cadmus S. Cates of Company K was a whole-souled, generous, good-natured fellow, but while in camp was a little inclined to be lazy and lay in his tent and smoke that big laurel root pipe for hours. The pipe stem was made so he could place the pipe on the ground when in use. That's the epitome of laziness. You don't have to touch the pipe while you're smoking it. While we were on Cemetery Hill July 2nd supporting a battery, pieces of shell fell pretty often and thick about us, and it was dangerous, though we were flat on the ground. Comrade Gates laid flat on the ground with his legs spread wide apart, one leg across the comrade next to him, and was asked by Henry Butler if he was afraid, and replied, "Do not want to lose one leg at a time." That was really a really good reason under the circumstances for spreading out in that way. I noticed others did the same. Cadmus was a good soldier and never showed signs of weakening in the battle line and on the charge or anywhere on that field. So he might have been a slovenly, lazy guy in camp, but once you brought him out here, he did his duty. And that's the case of a lot of men, probably women too, in the Army today. They're nothing in garrison, but you get them out in a high-pressure situation, they're listening and they perform. So no different in the Civil War. Let's see. You got enough of that. So while that's going on, of course, down here at the southern end of the field, about 4 o'clock, Confederates start launching their assaults on July 2nd. Starts moving up the line. Caldwell's division from this area, probably a little bit further south, is pulled from the line and sent down there to support Sickles in the wheat field. That leaves a giant gaping hole in this line. And they start pulling men from other areas. Remember, 5 companies of the 13th are supporting the artillery on Cemetery Hill. The other 5 companies are sent this way, not this far, but north of the copse of trees, and Hancock gets a hold of them. The Lang's Floridians are coming across, and then Wright's Georgians are coming across, and they're overrunning Union cannon, specifically Turnbull's battery and Gillian Weir's battery. Hancock sees these 5 companies, talks to their commanders, and says, "Can y'all go out there and take those guns?" They say, "We can," and I'm paraphrasing because I'm moved down here so we don't go late. He says, "We can." Interestingly, Hancock says, "Well, if you think you can, do it, but it's not an order." And you don't expect that from Hancock. Hancock usually says, "Go and do this and do it now." Hancock's saying, if you don't think you can do it, you don't have to, because it's just 5 companies. It's a battalion-sized formation. But they say they can, and Vermonters actually go across that field. The 19th Maine is probably right there with them. So they capture these guns. When they report back, they say they recapture. They capture 2 Confederate guns. There are no Confederate guns captured then. What I think it is the Confederates have a couple of Turnbull's guns, and they're trying to drag them away, and they overrun those Confederates, and they grab these 2 guns and bring them back, thinking it's the Confederates trying to withdraw their own guns. So between them and the 19th Maine, they're going to recapture Weir's guns and Turnbull's guns. This is the Vermonters. You don't hear this part of their story. You just hear the 3rd day. So they're doing good work. At least the 13th Vermont is doing good work on July 2nd. Now, Somehow my pages are starting to fly out of here. I got one more thing about July 2nd to read to you till we move on to July 3rd. All right, so as they're going out there, and this comes from Proceedings of the Vermont Historical Society. It was an address given in 1870 by George Scott. He's the first sergeant, Company G, 13th Vermont. And he's talking about these 5 companies going across the field up north of us. We drove the enemy down to the peach orchard, not that one, there's one over there, until we reached a farmhouse on the Emmitsburg Road, where we halted and fired some 15 rounds into the retreating enemy. In the meantime, Captain Lonergan, in command of Company A, and this was an all-Irish company, so you imagine what they're like in garrison. Anybody Irish? I heard Irish people are wild. You all wild? When you're in garrison? I get it. He approaches the house and found it full of rebels. He informed Randall of the fact, who went up and ordered them to throw their guns down out the window and surrender, which they did. At which time Colonel Randall, ever mindful of his laurels, remarked to them, "Remember, you were captured by Colonel Randall of the 13th Vermont." At this time, Colonel Randall sent back Adjutant Peck for further orders and soon received permission to return. Colonel Randall was not the most modest man in the world. He was fond of his regiment and was determined that the world should recognize every laurel it won. So on getting within 20 rods of our main lines, he orders us to halt and lie down to rest. Soon an aide from the general came riding down to us, whom the colonel addressed as follows: "Captain, report to your general what we have done. We have recaptured 6 guns, 2 taken from the enemy, driven him half a mile and taken 100 prisoners. Also tell him that we propose staying here until he acknowledges our achievements." Excuse me. Back rode the aide. Randall soon discovered the enemy were trying to flank us to take us prisoners, and preferring to lose his laurels than spend the fall in Libby prison, he led us back to the original line. So reality took over and he moved off. It probably wasn't the enemy, but it's getting dark. It was probably some Union troops coming back that he sees, because the Confederates have been driven and they're not coming back on this particular day. In that same publication, I found this interesting, because we like to make fun of Jeff Daniels up there saving America on Little Round Top. Not Jeff Daniels' fault. It's not Chamberlain's fault. It's not anybody's fault. That's who they put in the book and the movie, and so it gets blown up maybe out of proportion. But this is back in 1870. If it be not invidious to make distinctions when all did well, we say all honor to the 20th Maine and the 13th Vermont for snatching victory from defeat, the one upon Round Top and the other upon the left center. So they should have put the 13th Vermont in the movie as well, because between them and the 20th Maine, they snatched victory from defeat here at Gettysburg on July 2nd. Questions before we move a little further down here? Yes, sir.
The order for the 13th Vermont by Hancock, was that before or after he went to 1st Minnesota?
This is before. No. This is after.
Oh, so he had no problem sending them in there.
Well, he forms that as a question, too. See those flags, can you capture them?
I didn't think they had a choice.
Probably not. But the way he phrases it, though, I'd have to look at the quote. I might be wrong. But here he definitely asks.
He didn't give the 1st Minnesota that option.
You're right. But that takes place before, so things are much tenuous. By now, the tide is receding and going. The Confederate tide's receding and going back that way.
So did he hit them on the way to Willards or after Willards?
This is after Willards.
Okay.
Yeah, this is definitely after Willards.
So just trying to get an idea of what his...
Because this Willards Brigade that we talked about last year and the Minnesotans that stopped Lang's Brigade, and then they pitch into Wilcox Brigade. So this is what I wanted to do. See those people right there? I knew they were coming across the field. So imagine that keep it in your mind. They might be gone by the time we do this. Those are Pickett's men, although they're a lot more further away. But they're coming across. They're actually doing Wright's Brigade for the Gettysburg Foundation. So I knew they were coming across because I talked to that guide last weekend. But imagine men coming across a lot closer when we go out here in this field a little bit. So, but questions about the second day. That's what we've covered so far. I thank everybody who's asked questions. So the second day's end, everything settles down, and let's move down here to the 13th Vermont's monument. The 13th is over there. You see, that's the Vermont Brigade. It's got Stannard up on top. The 13th is the next one with a soldier. That is Lieutenant Stephen Brown. And if you get close to it, up where he's standing, that piece of slab of granite or whatever he's standing on, you can see the edge of a hatchet sticking off to the side. So they included this hatchet because it was such a big deal on the monument. He is the lowest ranking Union soldier on a monument, I'm pretty sure. I'm 99% sure he's it. Because most of these guys are generals or majors or above. He's a lieutenant, Lieutenant Stephen Brown. And because what he did, that had to stick in their minds here at Gettysburg. Not only did he look after his troops coming up, getting them water, and risking arrest, which he gets arrested, but he's allowed to go along. He just has a sword taken from him. He doesn't let that deter him when the fighting starts, and he leads those men forward and helps support those batteries on July the 2nd. So then we have the Vermont, and that is the Vermont monument. It's for all the Vermonters that are here at Gettysburg, the cavalry and the two brigades. And here we have the 16th Vermont, and then that one down there is the 14th, all right? So, with the exception of this monument, these other monuments were dedicated in 1889. This one was dedicated, let me see, 1887? Don't quote me on it. It's before 1889. This one was dedicated. This is the first one put up, but it was not put here. So if you look at the bottom of that, above that bronze relief thing there where you can see etching you can't read, it says, participated near this point in action of July 2nd, picketed this line that night, held same as skirmishers until attacked by Pickett's division July 3rd, rallied here and assaulted his flank to the right 400 yards, then changing front, charged left flank of Wilcox and Perry's brigades. At this point, captured many hundred prisoners and 2 stands of color. And then you see the bottom says, the point to which the above inscription refers to is south 58 degrees, west 1,000 feet from this monument, and near the northerly end of the Cadore thicket. So, if you take all that direction, they assault Pickett's men up here somewhere. Well, Pickett's men don't get here. They really would have got far if they get here. This monument was out in the field. And then I think it's 1902 or 1907, it gets moved back here. Why does it get moved back here? The road comes in. Now I've seen pictures, I'm not sure when Hancock Avenue gets put in, but I've seen pictures from 1885 and there's a dirt road coming down through here. And so they moved that road down through here. You have this knoll over here. And you have this little high mound here. They clearly have flattened this area to put these roads in. And they do that in several places for us to get around. So I don't know for certain, but I imagine there's more to that knoll in 1863 than there is today. but that's where Hancock's wounding monument is, and Stannard gets wounded here too. He doesn't lose his arm, like I said, but that's probably the area where Stannard gets wounded also, although they say that marker's in the wrong spot. But you could easily change that to Stannard's wounding monument probably too, because he's in that area when Hancock gets wounded. He gets wounded. But this is in the wrong spot. It was across the road. They put in the road. Park Service, the War Department back then wants people to see monuments, so they line them up and they move it back. So if you read all that, it doesn't make sense. But when you move it out here, it does make sense. It tells you the story a little bit better. So that's just something to do. Monuments are an estimate. They're an estimate of where men fought. They can generally give you the direction if they have flank markers. You don't see any flank markers for these here because they're moving out here when they're fighting. And their other action is up there on the second day. Questions? All right, with that, let's move across the street. All right, did everybody get a card in the beginning? Do we have any big people walk up with no card? All right, good enough. So July 3rd comes. 16th Vermont is sent out on skirmish duty, so they're out there. The 13th and the 14th, as I'm facing you, are lined up here. 13th's over here to my left, your right, and the 14th is over here. And they're gonna sit here all day long in the hot sun. It was recorded 2 o'clock, it's 87 degrees that day. That thermometer, I forgot to ask if you're good. I assume you're good, sorry. The thermometer reading was taken in the shade. So it's probably in the low 90s out here, and it's a still day. We don't have this nice breeze, and you know, it's hot sitting out here, and it's draining. It makes you sleepy, it makes you tired. We all know a little after 1 o'clock, and they watch the Confederates set up their artillery because it's up here. A little after 1 o'clock, 2 signal guns go off in the Peach Orchard, and the rest of the approximately 150 guns on the Confederate side open up on this line. They're trying to take out as many Union guns as they can and to demoralize the Union infantry up there along that wall. So when their infantry comes across, there's less people shooting at them, and they can punch a hole, drive up, take Cemetery Hill, end the war. We'll see how it goes. So, cannonade has started. Colonel Veazey, let's see where this is from. This is from Vermont at Gettysburg. It's by George Benedict. He was an aide to Stannard. So he was like his aide de camp, riding around with Stannard. And this was published in 1870. He writes, Colonel Veazey of the 16th Vermont, in a recent letter to the writer, recalls the most remarkable effect of the cannonade on his men, who it may be premised had been on picket the night before and in common with the rest of the Vermont Brigade, had been almost without food for 24 hours. He says the effect of this cannonade on my men was the most astounding thing I ever witnessed in any battle. Many of them, I think a majority, fell asleep, and it was the greatest effort only that I could keep myself awake, notwithstanding the cries of my wounded men and my anxiety in reference to the most fearful scenes which I knew would speedily follow. The portion of his regiment of which he speaks was lying at this time in front of and almost under the muzzles of our own batteries. So again, they've been pushed out and they're laying there. The cannonade goes on anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours, and it's hot, and they fall asleep. Soldiers will sleep when they can. Old people named Lewis will sleep when they can, so I completely understand. I get the best car line naps every afternoon during the week picking up my kids. But they're out there, and this cannonade is just droning on. They probably hadn't had enough to drink, and they haven't been fed for 24 hours, and they fall asleep. And I got to tell you, when it's hot like that, it's the hardest thing to wake up, and I've experienced it. You feel groggy. I don't want to say it's akin to being drunk. I never get drunk. But it's like that. You just can't move as fast as you would like to, and your head's kind of foggy until you fully come awake. Now, I take it they came awake more fully than I would just sitting at home trying to wake up from a nap, but still, they're out here sleeping. So, let's see here. This comes from the Batchelder papers. Again, it's part of Stannard's diary. July 3rd, 1863. All remained quiet until about 2:00 p.m. when the rebels opened up on us again in the fiercest possible manner and continued for an hour or more. They were promptly replied to by our cannon. The casualties and horses this time was great, and some in men at this time. The enemy was seen marching in line of battle immediately in our front, and Colonel Veazey came in with his regiment. That's the 16th. So when the infantry assault begins, probably around 3 o'clock, they're out here. It's Pickett's men that they see, because they're right over there. Right over there. I can barely see the top of the Spangler Farm. So Virginia Monument straight across. To the left of that is the Henry Spangler Farm. That's where Pickett's men come from. 16th is out there. They can clearly see them coming. And that's when Colonel Veazey brings his men back here to the rest of the brigade. Let's see. They came within 100 yards or thereabout when Colonel Nichols, he is the commander of the 14th Vermont Regiment. Nobody ever hears about Colonel Nichols. He doesn't get talked about a lot. The 14th's here, they do good work, but we just don't have those anecdotes like we have for the 16th and 13th, as we do with the 14th. They came within 100 yards thereabout when Colonel Nichols, in order to change his line, had a part of his regiment rise up. That being discovered, the rebels halted, and I immediately ordered fire from both regiments, the 13th and 14th. Again, the 13th is over here, 14th is over here. They're spread out. Pickett's men are coming this way. 16th is falling back, and Stannard has these two regiments rise up and fire at them. They are probably by the road at this point. That's as far as range goes, that's pretty far out there. But they're pushed out in this field as well. And like I say, that 16th monument was out here somewhere. I don't know if Tim Smith's ever done one of those Monuments Mondays on that and talked about it moving. Because I watched some of them, but there's so much stuff out there to watch. I can't keep. And I do it at work, so I'm only halfway listening. Makes the day go by. But that's why that monument's out here, and it gives you those directions of where they're going to move to, because it's out here. So they're pushed out further, but I imagine when Pickett's men get to the road and come across, and I don't think they have the fence problem like they do further up, because Confederates came across on the second day and they've been knocking down fences. So they're coming across, they're taking fire now from the 13th and 14th. So with that in mind, they gave you those cards with numbers, right? If you have a 13, could you make two lines over here, two line rows, one behind the other, the 14, and then the 16th behind the 14th in two lines? Is that too confusing?
2 lines of battle?
2 lines of battle, exactly right. Y'all 13?
13.
All right, 2 lines, just keep spreading that way. Y'all are 14?
Should be able to get over my shoulder. We'll see. Okay, cool.
16? All right, make 2 lines. See how they got 2 lines, 2 lines? 1, 2. Y'all got the dogs. I think y'all might win. So, yeah, it's about even. All right, y'all can come this way some, just for hearing purposes. I'm going to be moving around, so. All right, everybody good, in their spot. 13, 14.
Where's 13 over there?
13. Probably behind me, so I can see in there.
You want me to be behind him?
I think it'll block my voice and me seeing. That works. 13th, 14th. When the 16th is pulled back, they line up behind the 14th, sort of, in here. Now, these lines are over here. They're stretched further that way, all right? We don't have enough people to stretch them out there, and it doesn't detract from the story starting here. But they are stretched that way. These are long lines. Each one of these regiments has over 600 men here at Gettysburg. So comparatively speaking to other Union regiments, these are big regiments. And this is their first big battle. That's why they have so many people still. The people they've lost, the men that they've lost, is primarily due to illness and such. And that takes, as we know, that takes most of the Civil War soldiers. So, let's carry on. So when Stannard orders the 13th and 14th to fire at Pickett's men, he writes, the rebels immediately changed direction by their left flank and moved, passed by command, receiving fire the whole distance. That's when they come across and they oblique to the left, because that's the plan all along. And they're coming on both sides of the Cadore barn. Stannard thinks they're changing direction because his men are firing at him. Stannard clearly didn't see the movie, or he would know. This is by design. Stephen Lang drew it out there in this little sand table. But that's why they think they're moving, because they're firing. But that's part, they're closing the gap. The intended target is up in that direction, not here. It is probably the responsibility of Lang and Wilcox's brigade to take care of these men here. And they don't come out at the same time because there is a complete lack of coordination, and they don't even know what they're supposed to be doing when it starts. And this is a big failure on the Confederates' part. But this area is supposed to have been taken care of by Lang and Wilcox. So if they come out at the same time, when Pickett's men oblique to the left, these other two brigades are hitting these Vermonters square on, and they're not going to do anything, and we'll stand here and talk about what they did. Presumably they win, and we won't do anything further. That should be the story on the Confederate side, but we know they don't come out at the same time. There's nothing facing these Vermonters once Pickett's men turn this way. Let's see. When passed by our front, they changed direction again by right flank and marched direct to attack our lines. At this time, this is Stannard talking, at this time I ordered Colonel Randall to change forward front and form again on the flank, which was done in good style. Also the same order to Colonel Veazey, and ordered him to form on the left of the 13th, thereby placing rebels under flank fire the whole length of their line, closed in mass by column by regiment. I will here state that I intended at first to place my whole command in same position, but saw the rebels forming in line of battle on my left again. Now, so Stannard's going to say that he orders this. Randall of the 13th is going to say he orders this. When you got two people competing, saying that, yeah, I'm the one that actually said do this, you know it's going to turn out right. Because if it turns out badly, nobody wants to say I did it. So by virtue of two men competing and saying, no, I'm the one that said that, you know the ending's going to be pretty good for the Vermonters. So either way, they're going to order these two regiments to swing this way. It's going to be the 13th and the 16th. 14th is going to be here. Now, we're going to walk over there. You all come with us. You're lined up now to show you what the formation looked like, but you're not going to take part right then. They're back here. Keep that in mind. You two regiments are going to be the ones doing the heavy lifting, all right? This is from George Scott again, 13th Vermont. As Randall was bringing the companies of the regiment upon the new line, swinging them out, swinging them like a dog, the right of his regiment was temporarily thrown into confusion by the interference in the command on the part of a drunken aide who gave orders to Company A, those Irishmen, to move back upon the line. He wanted to He wanted to know of Randall what in the hell he was forming a new line for. Randall replied that if he had any orders from General Stannard, he hoped he would give them to him as colonel of the regiment and not interfere with the command. So there's some confusion with other people coming in here wanting to know what you're doing, what the 13th is doing. But the command's going to be to change front forward on the 1st company. What that means is you've got your companies lined up. The 1st company on the end is going to do a 45-degree angle, face a new direction, and these other companies are going to come online and line back up with the regiment. Therefore, your line moves from this to a 45-degree angle from where it previously was. Everybody good? The 16th is going to come up and join on the 13th's left. Now, how they do this, I am not sure. I don't know whether they pass through the ranks of the 14th to get alongside them. I don't know if one of the members of the 16th wrote that they came behind the 14th and joined up. So most likely, instead of coming through, they came around them, but then move out onto the field and get on their left flank. Either way, it's going to be the 13th and the 16th now facing this way, and in front of us, you've got Kemper's brigade coming across. And then beside them, you've got Garnett, but Kemper's brigade is closer to us. Questions? All right, so 13th Vermont, let's swing out here. Keeping your ranks. Once you get perpendicular, just line back up in your 2 lines. Get on that side. Leave a space, who's ever on the far right, leave a little space, and then have your 2 lines just next to them. And then y'all just come on. You're just watching. Or you can join in and make another rank behind each of these if you want. That was primarily to show you how they line up. All right, where's the beginning of one and the ending? All right, so they get perpendicular to the main line. Pickett's men are coming across here. Let's see, where is it at? Behind the 13th, there's Lieutenant Brown. Behind that monument, there's a monument like this little granite stone here. It says the 1st position of the 13th. This one says the 2nd position. It's the right flank. We will march out here to the 3rd marker for the 13th. So they have 4 monuments, if you will, on the field. They got the 3 position markers and their regimental markers. Not too shabby for 9 months, guy, to have all these. 27th Connecticut has something similar going through the wheat field, so pretty good, I think. So let's walk across here. And keep in mind, while this is going on, the 14th is still back there. They don't move. The other thing I'd like you to notice is, what are you doing right now? You're going uphill. This is not flat ground out here, but you stay on the road, generally speaking. You just look over here, and you're not looking at this. You're looking at the barn or something. You don't realize the terrain. All right, let's pause. Let's reform our lines, man. Just like in battle. We're getting all mixed up. Let's pause. Reform our lines here. Let's straighten it out. 2-hour men. 2-hour men and women. Y'all are doing great. This comes from the War of Confederate Captain Henry Owen. He is familiar to us because he was in Garnett's brigade, and we did a Garnett brigade walk. Dr. Pete Carmichael first introduced me to this fella. But he writes, as they're coming across, so this is Kemper, but Garnett's brigade is over there. They can look across and see. There off to our right was the grandest sight I ever seen. A body of Yankees, 800 or 1,000 yards away, coming at a double quick. We're not doing the double quick. Right shoulder shift. Uniforms looking black in the distance. Muskets glittering in the sunlight. Battle flags fluttering in the breeze created by their quickened motion. Why do you think their uniforms look black? They're new. They haven't done anything. They've had them for 6 months and they haven't been through fights and anything. So they're darker than the usual guys who have been going through 2 years of fighting. I saw at once that they were men let loose by the withdrawal of our support on the right. The support on the right hasn't come up yet, so he's mistaken there. They don't withdraw until after Owen goes back. Their line was perpendicular to our own, and they were hastening to strike us before we reached the stone wall. I saw it was to be a race, and as General Garnett came along saying several times, faster, men, faster. I put my men to the double quick, and each time was ordered on quick time. I have always thought that Garnett perhaps saw this flanking party, but then there was no way of ever deciding that point. Your position being more to the center of the line, you did not feel the shock of this attack on our right, which struck us at least 100 yards from the stone wall. And I saw their men up to 60 or 70 yards of the right flank of the 8th Virginia and deliberately fire into our whole line. That's these Vermont men that he sees as they're coming across. So, all right, everybody good still? Watch your step and let's keep going. You know, this is dried up. I walked this about 8 o'clock this morning. My feet were soaked. Yeah.
What was on the ground then? Was this farmer's field?
Farmer's field, yeah. Although it had been trampled, at this point it was wounded, you know, because of the July 2nd action. But yeah, they was, just like today, it was all farmer's fields.
Thank you.
And they use it today, not necessarily this one area, but they lease out the land to farmers, and that's why you'll see corn and hay growing during the year. So. All right, that's good right there. You don't have to come further. Line back up, line back up. It is muddy up this way. All right, everybody good?
Yep.
You good? All right. You can see this marker here. This is, says 13th Vermont, F.V. Randall, Colonel, the right of Stannard's brigade, 3rd position, 3rd day, struck Pickett's flank here. However, how many of y'all have been out to this marker before? Pretty good number compared to some of the other places. But this is where they're at. You can see how close we are to the copse of trees. And so that's where these Confederates are heading. You can see how far we've come across this field. You can see how uneven it is. Now, whether they got to that spot or here, it's in the neighborhood. So they're up here, and again, look out here, look behind you. You can see this is not flat ground. The ground goes up and down, and you can see it going up directly to our front. So these Confederates aren't coming across flat ground either as they go up here. When they come up here, they deliver pretty devastating fire into the right flank of Pickett's men. And Pickett's men are going to have to divert a couple companies to try to deal with this problem. Again, this problem was supposed to have been dealt with Wilcox and Lang's brigades launching their assault, but they haven't launched it. So there's no protection on the right flank. When I'm giving a regular tour, when we get to the 3rd day, which is not a very long stop because this is not a long action, it probably takes 55 minutes for Pickett's men to start and get all the way back, and it's over. The cannonade lasts longer than the artillery barrage prior to the infantry coming across. So it's not a very long action. But what I do say is on the right side of the Union line, the 8th Ohio swings out. Down here on the left, some Vermonters swing out. And that's about all I say. You're getting attacked from both ends, and still they come on. So I don't want to say what the Vermonters do is overlooked, but we never go into detail about it like we do some other things. But I think they play an instrumental part, along with what's up there at the wall, on helping to repulse what we call Pickett's charge, or Longstreet's assault, or the Pickett Pettigrew Trimble charge. So questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I think they actually made it past the fence. The atlases I've seen doesn't show them crossing this fence here. Do you think they got there?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know. And is the fence in the same spot? I don't know. I always, like I said over there, these are estimates of where things happen. Did they get into this area? Yeah. But I don't think they would need to cross the fence, because they're not going up there taking prisoners or anything. They're just trying to stop as many men before they get up there to their objectives as they can. So I don't think there would have been a need to cross the fence. But I just don't know. I haven't read anything about it. So, but good question. I hadn't thought of it. Any other questions? All right. So while this is going on, we've struck Pickett's flank. They're going forward. They're getting struck from all directions up there at the wall. And then people look back to your rear, and what do they see? They see two other bodies of Confederates coming along. And that would be Lang's Floridians and Cadmus Wilcox Alabamians. They're coming across the field. What they're doing is they're going straight towards Francis McGilvery's artillery line over there. But there's no, it's not helping Pickett's men. The 14th is back over there. We brought them along so they could hear. I can't yell loud enough for the 14th to hear me way over there. So, especially with the wind. I don't think I could do it with a megaphone. We brought the 14th along, but they were lined up back over there where they were. When these two other brigades of Confederates come across, Stannard is going to take the 16th. They're going to do an about face, and they're going to go back that way. And they are going to strike the Floridians and the Alabamians in their flank. The 14th Vermont's firing in their front, and they're going to stop those two brigades, as if they had any chance to do anything anyways. But then the 13th is just going to move back as they did. They're not going to my knowledge, they don't take part in this action against these other two brigades. So questions about that? All right, real quick, I usually start my tours with the ORs. This time I'm doing it towards the end. This is from General Stannard's official report, July 4th, so his memory should have been pretty fresh. During this charge, he's talking about Pickett's charge, the enemy suffered from the fire of the 13th, 14th, the range being short at the commencement of the attack. I called the 16th from the skirmish line and placed them in close column by division in my immediate rear. As soon as the change of the point of attack became evident, I ordered a flank attack upon the enemy's column. Forming in the open meadow in front of our lines, the 13th changed front forward on 1st Company. The 16th, after deploying forward the same, and formed on the left of the 13th at right angles to the main line of our army, bringing them in line of battle upon the flank of the charging division of the enemy, and opened a destructive fire at short range, which the enemy sustained but a very few moments before a larger portion of them surrendered and marched in, not as conquerors, but as captives. I then ordered the two regiments into their former position. The order was not filled when I saw another rebel column charging immediately upon our left flank. Colonel Veazey of the 16th was at once ordered to attack it in turn in its flank. This was done successfully as before. The 16th took in this charge the regimental colors of the 2nd Floridian and the 8th Virginia regiments, and the battle flag of another regiment. So that was what Stannard turned in. Let's see here. How much time we got? Yeah, we're doing all right. Questions? Anybody have questions? I like questions. Yes, sir.
Do you think? What do you think? I mean, do you think if the Vermonters don't do this, I mean, do you think Pickett's charge this has no bearing on whether it fails or succeeds? You know what I'm saying?
I think it still fails.
Yeah.
They just don't have enough men. They don't knock out as many cannon as they'd like to. They're sort of fooled into thinking they've knocked out a lot when they start pulling guns off the line. They're just replacing them. And I just don't think, I don't know any way to change anything other than a complete collapse of the Union line, which is not going to happen, to change the outcome on the third day. I always say, and this is my opinion, that the high water mark is July 2nd with Wright's brigade. And Pickett arrives about 2 o'clock. If you throw Pickett's men in behind Wright's brigade, where there's clearly a problem on the Union line, that's why Hancock is running like mad up and down the line. That's your chance. And that's just my opinion and speculation. It doesn't mean anything. But I think the Vermonters do great damage to Pickett's men and help. It's something on the right they've got to pay attention now to. But they're turning that way anyways. I just don't think they have enough firepower to get up there because they're just pulling men from anywhere and throwing them in there. That and what takes place on the other end, part of that force gets knocked back by the 8th Ohio. They just don't have enough. So I don't think it has a bearing on whether it fails or succeeds, but I do think it's an important action in helping it fail a little more decisively, if you will. So, any other questions?
I got another one.
Yes, sir.
Do I have this correct? That a large portion of the 16th was behind us along in front of the Plum Run Valley, facing Wilcox and Lang for quite a while. It seemed like they were split into two parts of 16th.
Well, once the 13th swings out, the 16th comes with them on their left. The 14th stays back there.
Right.
And they're just north. That's called the Cadore-Trossel Thicket. And if you go further south, that's where Willard's brigades attack along Plum Run, the northern portions of Plum Run. And you come up, there's this thicket there. And they're in that area. They're between the mound over here and that area. The 14th stays back there. They're facing this other group coming. But the 16th is out here at this point. Okay. They leave that area. There's 2 regiments. But once this is starting to die down, that's when Stannard says he sees these other 2 units coming across the field. He turns the 16th around. They hit him in the flank, and the 14th hits him in the front. Is that?
I was under the impression there was a portion of the 16th, maybe 5 companies, that were for a long time like skirmishers.
Oh.
In the thicket there.
Well, there are skirmishers out there. Once the infantry comes across, they all fall back. I'm pretty sure they all rejoin, and they line up behind the 14th. Right. But yeah, they are. If you look in Wayne Mott's and Jim Hessler's Pickett's Charge book, if you don't have that book, that's a worthy recommendation. But the map they have in there, and no 2 maps are alike, they have the Vermonters lined up in front of the Hancock wounding knoll. So where Hancock's wounding marker is, that knoll there, they have these 3 regiments lined up in front of that. But they're spread out more than these little lines on the map, So they're somewhere between that and the thicket. So
I was probably thinking of Leno's Atlas, probably. I think the way it looked.
Could be. Like I said, and I did this maybe the second year we did Archer's Brigade, and I printed out 6 different maps of what Archer's attack looked like from 6 different books, and none of them looked the same. Some of them had the gravel pit, some of them didn't. So no 2 maps, it depends on who you're getting to do your maps. Hessler and Mott's didn't do those maps, I'm sure, unless they were in the Marines and they got their leftover box of crayons. Anybody in the Marines? I couldn't help myself, I'm sorry. That's what Army does, you understand, yeah. Yeah, that's about it.
I have a question as well. You said that some of Pickett's men changed to confront the Vermonters as they're coming up.
I think a couple companies do.
A couple of companies do. Okay. So basically, as the Vermonters are coming this way, then you have those Pickett's men change and face this way and not contribute going that direction.
Yeah, they're coming this way and they turn. Whether they turn and stop and fire or they turn and move forward, I kind of think they stop. But it's less men you have going that way. So he has, you know, these are Kemper's men.
Yeah.
And he's got to do something. He's got this
force on his flank.
uncontested force on his right flank. And you don't know what else to do. Go ahead.
Is Stannard here, or is he back with the 14th?
He's probably back there monitoring things. I can't imagine him riding out here. We'd have another John Reynolds incident or something.
An idea of the losses they took, whether it's 13th and 16th from here, are they taking a lot of losses? Or
I'm sure they're taking some. I get to the total casualties at the end, but I don't know exactly when they happen. So I'll get to that at the end. I just don't know. I'm sure they do incur some losses. Because when they go back, the Confederates lob more shells over when everything's moving back. They just don't, after the cannonade, they just don't pack up their cannons and go home. They're still lobbing shells over here, and they incur wounding from that. So, anyhow, yes, sir.
Probably a lost subject. After these guys go home, this is curiosity on my part. Do any of these guys re-enlist and join the other Vermont regiments?
Some of them do, and it'd be the 17th Vermont.
Okay.
I read somewhere where they go back and they're asked to stay in and re-enlist. And a lot of them say no, and whoever asks them gets angry with them. And my thing is, you should have asked us to stay longer than 9 months. We did what you asked. Don't get angry with me now. And if you had competent leadership, you wouldn't need us to begin with. But some of them do. But a lot of them just, they go about their lives and try to, put their lives back together. So even if they don't see Antietam or Sharpsburg, or same place, Fredericksburg, Second Manassas, all that stuff, they've still been through a lot just being here. And they've seen people get their heads blown off by cannon shell. And that's something, You don't need to see it 10 times to have it affect you. So they just go back and live their lives. They did their duty, and they did what was asked of them.
Thank you, sir.
So, any other questions? That was a good question, though. All right, so where was I at? So any questions about the action of these three regiments here on either day? Good? Edwin Palmer, who I've quoted from before, wrote this on July 3rd. Who can present a fight just as it was waged by 170,000 soldiers, each determined to conquer for 16 hours scarcely interrupted, and often reminding one of Milton's words. From those deep-throated engines belched, whose roar emboweled with outrageous noise the air, with all her entrails tore, disgorging foul, their devilish glut chained thunderbolts and hail of iron globes, which on the victor host, leveled with such impetuous fury smote, that whom they hit, none of their feet might stand, though standing else's rocks, but down they fell by thousands. Anybody know what that's from? And I'll tell you why I like this.
Paradise Lost.
Paradise Lost. Very good. You're an Orioles fan. I knew you were smart. Yeah, I'm with you all the way. Me and Rich Snyder, we're with you. There he is. What I like about this is it shows these were literate men. They weren't just whole, country bumpkins out there plowing fields and saying, oh, we got a war, let's go, boys. No, they were literate men out here fighting, And you didn't have to be a college professor to be a literate man back then. So that's why I included that. I'll skip that. Edward Palmer again, this is after the battle, July 4th. Dear Mother and Father, I wrote you last when at Emmitsburg. We did not then expect to march that day, but we suddenly found ourselves tramping and as suddenly in sight of a battlefield. When we arrived at this place, each boy's feet were very badly blistered, and all of us so tired we could hardly stand up. We and our friends ought to thank God we were not killed, for this is really the greatest wonder. I came out of the fight without a scratch. You have learned the names of the wounded before this can reach you. When or where we shall now move, none of us know. Your affectionate son. And they do, when Meade starts to move the army on the 7th, they do move with the army. and they are following Lee's army back towards the river, the Potomac River. They don't cross the river, though. They start to, at some point, they get turned around and say, all right, y'all are done. And they turn around, they start to get the mustard out, and they head on their way. And so that's going to end their service. This appeared in the Vermont Stannard, Friday, July 24th, 1863. And it's kind of fuzzy, so bear with me. Robert R. Corson, Esquire, state military agent at Philadelphia, informs Adjutant General Washburn that the graves of the following Vermont soldiers killed at Gettysburg may be found under a walnut tree in the center of line near Emmitsburg Road. So it's somewhere out here. There was a walnut tree that must have been well known. 14th Regiment, Sergeant John Vaughn, Dyer Rogers, G.L. Boseboom, Wes Lincoln, Corporal C.E. Meade, remember that name, C.W. Ross, 16th Regiment, Josh Martin, Martin Cook, Corporal Morse, Ira Emery, and R. Tartiel. It's hard to read because it's a little blurry. All right. Those of you who had names on your card, can you please come up here, if you will?
Get my close up here. It's my time to shine.
All right. Stella, all the way down. Who has Smith?
I have it.
And hold on there, Mike. Nope, that's yours. There you go. You can do it. Who has Hamilton? Not Alexander. That's that. Here you go, Stella. Meade. Good friend, Richard. I'm not going to read that because I'll cry. I will read this one. We all know what Sickles does with his leg, right? He's rather narcissistic fellow, and he donates it and he goes and visits it. Well, this is Myron Scullin. He's Company D, 13th Vermont. Severely by a musket shot to the right ankle joint, causing a compound fracture. His foot is amputated on 17 July at Newton University Hospital in Baltimore. The surgeon saved his foot and asked him if he wanted it. He said no. He was born on a farm in Essex, Vermont. He was 21 years old. He lived in Burlington after the year, employed as a shipping clerk. He visited his severed foot at the Medical Museum in Washington, D.C., 36 years after the battle.
Wow.
I wonder if he saw Sickles' leg there and talked with General Sickles. So it wasn't always just Sickles' leg there. Myron Scullin had his foot there too. Now, it's not always peaches and cream when you go back home. And not everybody's out that serves in any military goes back home and has a good life and does memorable things. This is from the Burlington Times, Tuesday, July 28, 1863. Murder in Charlotte. We learned that the neighboring town of Charlotte was on Sunday night the scene of a murder. The body of the murdered man, Henry Dunn, a private in Company I, 14th Vermont Regiment, was found on the roadside near Leavenworth Mills yesterday. It was perforated with buckshot, or perhaps a smaller size. An inquest was holding yesterday, but its results we have not yet ascertained. The officers have arrested an Irishman named Burns as a suspected murderer. His examination is to take place in Charlotte. And then we move on to August 1st, 1863. We have the following additional particulars in regard to the Charlotte murder. On Sunday evening, the 26th instant, Henry Drum, gets the name wrong, it's Dunn, a returned soldier of Company I in the 14th Regiment, aged about 38 years, and John Burns, lately of Gettysburg, that was a lie, I made that up. And John Burns Aged about 50 years, both residents of the southeasterly port of Charlotte in this county visited in company a person living in Heinsberg named John Murphy. During the evening, Dunn and Burns got into an altercation, and Burns left and went home. Almost an hour after, Dunn was also going home, and passing the house of Burns was shot by him, 56 shot entering his body, two of them passing through his heart. The body of Dunn was discovered about 8 o'clock in the morning of the 27th, lying by the road. I spent a little time. He goes to jail, and after 20 minutes, he's found guilty. He goes to court. 20 minutes, he's found guilty of murder. And I tried to look up to see what the sentence was. I contacted Dateline to see if they did an episode. I didn't find out either way, so I'm not sure what his sentence was, but he murdered this poor soldier who was giving his life out here in Gettysburg. So real quick before I let these fine people read a little bit, to go finish up the stories of these various men I've named by name. Colonel Veazey of the 16th, he's commanding the 16th. He has a daughter born on July 7th, 1863. A few days after this, he names the daughter Ann Gettysburg Veazey. He is awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions on July 3rd, and that's moving these men out here. He was a lawyer. He appointed to the U.S. Commerce Commission. He is elected commander of the Grand Army of the Republic, the GAR, and he dies on March 22nd, 1898. So we have one Medal of Honor winner. Captain John Lonergan. He's the guy that went out to the house on July 2nd, captured a bunch of Confederates out there on the road. It was probably down here. I keep pointing to here because we talked about it down there, but it's down here. And it might have been the Rogers house. The Rogers house stands where the white picket fence is. It's no longer there. But they're in this area, and Turnbull's guns are out in that area. So it's probably the Rogers house that he's there. He takes part in that charge, and under Colonel Randall to retake those guns. He led the charge of Company A to take Confederate prisoners in the house. He is awarded the Medal of Honor for capturing guns and prisoners on July 2nd, 1863. He dies in 1902 in Montreal, Canada. He's brought back and he's buried at St. Joseph's Catholic Cemetery in Burlington. Lieutenant George Benedict, he is that aide-de-camp to Stannard. He was a pre-war newspaperman. So that's why probably he writes the history. He's used to writing, that's his job. He enlisted as a private, was commissioned in March of 1863 as lieutenant, assigned to aide-de-camp to Stannard. By 1865, he was a major as assistant inspector general, not with the Army, but he is a major. 1866, he's appointed aide-de-camp to Governor Paul Dillingham with a rank of colonel. He's appointed to be the military historian for the state of Vermont in 1879. He is awarded the Medal of Honor for actions on July 3rd. The citation reads, passed through a murderous fire of grape and canister in delivering orders and reformed the crowded lines. He died April 8, 1907 at the age of 80. And then we have the commander of the 13th, Colonel Francis Voltaire Randall. You don't name people like that anymore. I'd ask young kids if they even heard that name before. After Gettysburg, he raised and commanded the 17th Vermont. 1883 was appointed vice president of Norwich University, and he dies in Northfield, Vermont on March 1st, 1885. And then we have somebody we haven't mentioned, that's Colonel Nichols. He's in charge of the 14th. He previously served in the 1st Vermont. That was a 3-month regiment that after everybody thought the war wasn't going to last but that long. They ended their service. He was serving in the Vermont House of Representatives when reassigned to take command of the 14th. After the 14th mustered out, he's elected to the Vermont Senate. At one point, he's on a ship, the SS Republic, and they're sailing down the Atlantic coast. It gets sunk off the coast of Georgia in 1865. He survives that, but imagine going through all that. He dies in 1882. And then finally, Lieutenant Stephen Brown. He's on the monument of the 13th over there. He joins the 17th. So this goes to the question, did men join afterward? He actually joins the 17th. He is wounded in the wilderness during that fight in 1864. I neglected to say, he gets a sword. And he gets a sword in this action. He sees a Confederate officer, and he takes that fella's sword, and that's the sword he uses for the rest of this battle and going forward. So he actually has a sword. He donated that sword that he captures on July 3rd to the Vermont Historical Society. He died on September 8th, 1903. And with that, here, I didn't give you this. We come to the story of some of these men. There we go. The 13th Vermont came here with 636 soldiers. They suffered 123 casualties for 19%. The 14th, 647 soldiers. They suffer 107 casualties for 16%. And the 16th, 661 men suffer 119 casualties for 18%. So a grand total of 1,944 men total here at Gettysburg for these three regiments. And they suffer a total of 349 casualties. That's pretty good. You know, it's not good, but it shows they're just not here doing nothing. They're putting in work. And you got to remember, we call it short timers attitude, because you can see your ETS, the expiration of your term of service, right over the hill. They know they're going home by the end of the month. And just like the 27th Connecticut, they're going to give all here. So let's follow up with Estella, no crying, and see the fate of William Doubleday. Here, let me have your thing. This thing.
Okay. And what do we start?
Start with that, another letter home.
Okay.
This is a letter to William Doubleday gets wounded. While he's wounded, he's at Letterman Hospital. He's going to write a letter to his wife.
A good letter you sent me, strawberries. Oh, good taste to me. You don't know how glad I was to see Mr. Avery. He says he will stay with me until I can go home. He tends to write to me, how I want to see you, but don't make yourself sick worrying about me. We're expecting every day to be moved. We can't go to a worse place than this. Uncle Dan says, I must not write any more, so goodbye. Kiss the boys for me.
Now you got more. I'm torturing her, I know.
That's all right. All right.
I picked you because I love you.
Aww.
Oh, I got to move over.
With Baird. I'm starting.
Oh, not here.
Right here?
I'm sorry.
Got it. All right. William Doubleday, suffered a compound fracture of the left tibia, leg amputated, died at 6 p.m. 14 August at Letterman Hospital, and buried the next day in Section 5, grave number 1 of that hospital cemetery. Subsequently moved to the Vermont plot of the National Cemetery in Gettysburg, A19. Born in Sharon, Vermont, resides in Sherburne at the time of enlistment. Farmer, married his wife, saw him at Gettysburg before he died.
And that's his grave, what it looks like over there in the Vermont section. Not a very big one. They have 61 graves over there. Not all of them known, but that's his grave thing. I don't know if you mentioned, he was 41 years old. That's an older age for soldiers out here. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay.
Here, I'll hold this for you.
This comes from the pictorial history of the 13th Regiment Vermont Volunteers. As the enemy began to give way, Sergeant Major Smith, whom we all loved, came up to Sergeant Scott and, clapping his hands exultantly, said, "Scott, aren't we giving them H dash?" You can fill in that. There you go. A moment later, a cannonball struck him, taking off his leg next his body, instantly killing him. His remains rest in the battlefield cemetery at Gettysburg. Killed, Smith Henry H., Sergeant Major, killed by a shell and buried near Peter Fry's pump. Subsequently moved to the Vermont plot of the National Cemetery in Gettysburg. A25, if you're looking it up. Resided in Stowe and enlisted 8 September 1862 at Morristown as First Sergeant Company E. He was 21 years old when he volunteered. Promoted Sergeant Major Field and Staff 23rd February 1863 and described as being second to no orderly in the 13th Vermont Regiment for neatness and promptness in attending to business that came within his line of duty.
That's why he's a sergeant major. Thank you, Mike. All right, next. Let me see here. There you go.
William H. Hamilton, Company I of the 14th Vermont.
You don't have to read all that. You can, because that's a lot.
I got it.
Okay, you're the boss.
Lieutenant Hamilton was born at Montgomery, Vermont in 1839. In 1844, his father removed with his family to East New York, where he was principal of one of the public schools. Lieutenant Hamilton received his early education at his father's school and subsequently a member of the State Normal School at Albany, New York. He was teaching a public school in Greene County, Long Island, when the war broke out. In May 1861, he resigned his position and enlisted in the 1st Regiment New York Volunteers. He was promoted to a first lieutenancy, but resigned in May 1862 and returned to New York City, where he was for a time engaged in recruiting for General Sickles' brigade. In the summer of 1862, while visiting friends in Fairhaven, Vermont, he again enlisted as a private in the 14th Regiment, preferring a private service in this regiment to a commission in a battery which he helped to raise for Sickles' brigade. He was appointed orderly sergeant of Company F, and in January 1863 was commissioned as second lieutenant of Company I. He was a man of high patriotism, of estimable character, a good officer, and faithful soldier. He fell in the discharge of his duty July 3rd and died the same day. His remains lie in Vermont section of the National Cemetery at Gettysburg. Furthermore, another section here, William Hamilton, both legs shot off by a shell. Died July 6th and buried on Michael Trossel's Walnut Row, west of the creek. Subsequently moved to the Vermont plot of the National Cemetery in Gettysburg in section B1.
You can leave it there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Take that, and finally reach. There you go, thank you. I'm sorry it's so small, but I couldn't make it bigger.
Right. You thought I couldn't read. Company C, 14th Vermont, Meade, Charles E., Corporal, buried on Jacob Hummelball's farm, subsequently moved to the Vermont plot of the National Cemetery in Gettysburg, A4. Born and resided in Heinsberg and enlisted as a corporal, age 25. He was a farmer.
Thank you very much. Especially since I'd have been crying doing that. So I like to read these or have somebody read them for me because they're not known names. There are some names over there in the cemetery that most folks know. When they give the cemetery tours, everybody has their specialty that they like to pick out. But there are a lot of names in there. So I try to highlight names that aren't so well known. And before I do these tours for a Union brigade or regiment or what have you, I go to the cemetery and I walk through that plot and I read all the names for whatever state they're from. There are Vermonters over there from other units. We've got Vermont cavalry units here at Gettysburg. So there's some buried over there. And there are some unknowns in the Vermont plot. Again, there are 61 total bodies in that plot. But I encourage you all to do that as well when you have time. Just go through the cemetery and pick a plot, a state plot, and walk through there. Because as long as you're looking at their name, they're not forgotten. It's those men that die, and nobody ever talks about them anymore or mentions their name or looks at their name on a gravestone. So do that and remember what these men did out here. I hope you've enjoyed today. I have. I'm just a little late. I apologize if you had something important going on, but thank you. Next month, we're doing Abner Doubleday. For our interactive activity, I'm going to get people to bring bats and balls, and we're going to invent baseball. So be prepared for that. So thanks, everybody.